Okay, let's start with a really simple question. In our world, pretty much everything, our power, our data, our entire lives is connected by these long, invisible lines. But what happens when one of those lines breaks?
Well, this is what happens, systemic paralysis. See, our current setup is built on something called linear fragility. It sounds complicated, but it just means you've got a single point of failure that can stretch for thousands of miles. One cut, and the whole thing comes crashing down. Total darkness. It's a system that was built for control, not for resilience.
But what if there's a totally different way to build our world? That's what we're going to dig into today. It's called the sovereign stack, and it's a blueprint for a future that doesn't just survive shocks. It actually thrives on them.
All right, so first up, let's really break down this crisis. The root of the problem, like we said, is linear fragility. And honestly, it's an old way of thinking, a relic from a world that just doesn't really exist anymore. This slide really lays it all out. On the left, you've got the linear world, totally dependent on those single, fragile lines. But on the right, you have the spherical world, which is more like a mesh, a web of distributed nodes. You know, it's the difference between a brittle chain that snaps the second you pull too hard and a living web that can actually heal itself. One is a victim of chaos, the other is designed to handle it.
So, if the problem is a straight line, then the solution has to be a completely different shape. And that brings us to the main event here, the sovereign stack. And this diagram right here gives you a great look at the entire concept. The sovereign stack is this vertically integrated system, and it's designed for what's known as island mode. That's just a fancy way of saying it can run completely on its own if the main grid goes down. And to pull that off, it needs 3 layers, all working together perfectly: the heart, the brain, and the soul. So let's look at what these layers actually are. The heart is the power source, that's Agra Energy. The brain is the intelligence, the operating system, which is called RIOS. And the soul, well, that's the human part. That's the DeReticular Academy, which trains the people, the operators who make this whole thing come alive.
Okay, so let's get into the anatomy of this thing. How does it really work? This is where the engineering gets absolutely fascinating.
So this is the heart. The Agra power core doesn't just burn trash. No way. It uses something called the molecular scissor protocol. At an insane temperature, we're talking 1500 degrees Celsius, it uses plasma to literally tear apart the molecular bonds in local waste. You know, old tires, plastics, you name it. And then it reforms that stuff into high-grade syngas for electricity and even synthetic diesel. It's literally turning a community's garbage into its own independent energy source.
Okay, so that's the heart. Now for the brain. And this is not your average server you'd find in an office. The RIOS CC1000 is basically a bunker for a motherboard. A normal server sucks in dust and eventually chokes to death. This thing does the exact opposite. It has a positive pressure cycle, so it's always breathing out, pushing all the nasty stuff away. Plus, its exoshell is a Faraday cage, shielding it from EMPs and anything else the world throws at it. It's built to live where normal IT goes to die. Now, this is where things get really wild. We're talking about a totally different approach to cybersecurity. We're moving past software firewalls into what's called a zero-trust bubble. And here, security isn't just defined by code. It's defined by the actual laws of physics. It's a perimeter that doesn't just check your password, it checks your physical DNA, so to speak. So how on earth does it do that? With something called the Watchtower Protocol. It uses radio frequency fingerprinting to identify any device that comes near it, a phone, a drone, whatever. Think of it like a unique voice print for every single machine, based on the specific radio signature its hardware gives off. It's physically impossible to fake. And based on that signature, devices are instantly sorted. Trusted green gets full access, guessed gray gets the internet and that's it, and hostile red is just blocked, period. The thread is shut down before it even gets to knock on the door.
Okay, so that all sounds amazing in theory, right? But is it just a cool idea, or does this stuff actually work out in the real world? Let's take a look at how it's being battle-tested in the field as we speak.
This is Operation Octagon. It's a global deployment of these strategic nodes. And the whole point is to prove that the RIOS stack can operate in the most brutal environments on the planet, from the freezing cold of the tundra to the blistering heat of the equator. This is not a concept on a whiteboard. It's a live, operational network. And here are just a couple of examples of these nodes out in the wild. You've got Node 2 up in Canada serving as the central command hub. Then you have Node 3 down in Arizona, nicknamed the Blast Furnace, where it's being used for mineral exploration in that ridiculously harsh desert.
And then there's Node 4 in Uganda, an incredible project that's not only generating 10 megawatts of clean power from local biomass, but also running an AI-powered medical clinic for the community. Each one proves just how flexible the system really is.
So what does all of this actually mean for you? This is where it gets personal. This is about a fundamental shift in how we see ourselves. From being just a passive consumer of services to becoming an active custodian of the infrastructure we all depend on.
Let's start with this number, 98.4%. Get this. That is the success rate for students in the DeReticular Academy when it comes to securing capital to build their own nodes. This isn't a traditional school where you graduate with debt. It's an incubator that turns learners into funded builders.
And they have a really clear 3-step action plan to make it happen. Step 1, you identify a physical site for your node. Step 2, you enroll in the academy to get the training. And step 3, while you're learning, you use a document called the Dean's Letter of Intent, which is basically proof you have a viable technical plan to go out and secure the grant funding you need. So you're literally acquiring the skills and the capital at the exact same time.
So we're going to end on this thought. The old world is built on hoping that someone else will come and fix the problem when the lights go out. This new model is built on the idea of making sure they never go out in the first place. So the real question this whole thing leaves us with is, which type of person are you going to be?